and welcome to Free Practice Fridays with Freya. I actually have no idea when we're releasing this, so welcome to Free Practice Wednesdays, maybe, who knows. Anyway, look, there's only one thing worth discussing when it comes to news at the moment, and that is the fact that the best content of 2022 has officially been released. I'm not talking about Free Practice Fridays with Freya, although I'm sure many of you think that. We might have 3 weeks to go, but I'm calling it early and I just don't see what can top this. Of course, the content that I'm talking about is VB going, well, full VB. He's no longer an adopted Australian, but full citizen. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then do yourself a favour and go over to Valtteri's Instagram and maybe get a haircut while you're at it. Get inspired. It is a fantastic piece of content which I think brought a smile to everybody's face, and absolutely VB, welcome to Australia. Very, very good. Now, this week I've gone and tapped another Lakeside Drive listener on the shoulder, and she has been gracious enough to spend some time with me talking about what it's like to be a Formula One fan in America, coming from the world where rubbing is racing, aka NASCAR. And look, to fiance Josh, if Tara's got a mullet for your wedding, it wasn't my fault. You can blame VB. But take a listen. Tara is one of the wonderful listeners who we actually got to meet when we were in Miami earlier in the year, and has now given us even more of her time to talk about all the awesome things when it comes to being a Formula One fan, 2022 season, and what surprised us most and what we're looking forward to in 2023. I'm joined by Tara here, who I have had the absolute privilege of actually meeting face-to-face, which is pretty rare for us when it comes to engaging with our listeners, which is super awesome. But I'll let you do your own introduction, Tara. Tell us a little bit about who you are and why it is that we know who you are.
So I am Tara, obviously. We kind of got into, when I say we, I say me and my fiance, we got into Formula One at the same time. So it's been a lot of fun on that side of it to kind of do it as a couple. But my real background is actually in NASCAR. So that's another fun thing, is it's kind of been the roles reversed, teaching my dad Formula One, as he's always been the one who's taught me NASCAR. So that's been fun. Yeah.
Amazing. I love this story, and I'd love to start there actually in terms of how you got into motorsport, because as you said, it wasn't Formula One first for you. So talk to me a little bit about what your experience was watching NASCAR, and then your experience with your dad, and now the roles being reversed and educating him on Formula One.
Oh, yes. So, I mean, ever since I can really remember, we've grown up around NASCAR. We live in Miami, and so Homestead Speedway is just about 45 minutes from where we are. And every single year, Fridays, we would take the day off, go watch the truck races. It would be my dad, one of his good friends, and their kids. And it was just, I just remember running around the Speedway like we were little, say, banshees, just running around the Speedway, having the time of our lives. So ultimately, that's where it started. So it's
amazing.
been, maybe since I was a very, very little girl. So, yeah.
Lots of strong memories for you then, just when it comes to being about being around motorsport and being around the track. Did you find that when other people brought their kids were there, do they tend to bring their sons along? Did people show up with their daughters as well? Did you notice any kind of difference in that experience?
Interesting to think about it that way. I guess I never really saw it because our friends had girls and boys, so it was just whoever was interested came. But I guess you would ultimately say, when you look around the crowd, it's definitely more, I would say, like a male sport, but there's a good amount of women that would go as well. So that was always nice, because it didn't seem to be so male dominant where it could be.
Yes. Yeah, understood.
And I would say kid-wise too. We all just enjoyed it.
Oh, that's awesome. And like you said, I think in terms of obviously your dad's so passionate about it. Anyone who he can bring along with him, I'm sure he'd absolutely love just to share that with them. And when did Formula One come into things for you?
So we were definitely on the COVID time frame of Formula One, Drive to Survive, coming into that. John, who's also a listener, which we all got to meet together,
Yeah.
he's the one who got us into it. He knew we were into NASCAR, and he's like, "You guys got to watch it. Like, you have nothing to do now." Because I mean, Miami and obviously everywhere, but we completely shut down. So he was like, "Watch it." We binge watched it right before the season started for 2020, and then we haven't looked back from there. We're involved in everything.
How fantastic. And do you notice that happening a lot around you in terms of, I suppose, growing support for Formula One in the US? Because I suppose similar to Australia, it's
Oh,
perhaps less of a mainstream sport to support. Is that changing?
100%. It's funny because I look at like when we got into Formula One, and I felt like out of our friends and even like people I went to school with, obviously social media, you could see it, like the presence there. It was still very quiet. And there was like a few people that would comment, like if I posted something. But now when I see everyone else's posts, everyone went to the Miami Grand Prix. Like it was just, it's completely blown up. It's so different than from where it was, even at
Yeah.
the beginning of COVID.
Yes.
I
Oh, we
think
certainly all
having the
saw
race
that.
here in Miami totally changed it.
We certainly all saw that. I think just in terms of that Miami crowd, it was, it's such a new type of supporter, I suppose, and a new kind of celebrities, I suppose, and things like that. It's not the traditional A-listers who you might see walking a red carpet or something. They're really new people who we're not familiar with, which I think kind of reflects that growth in terms of who they're really targeting with the sport. And interesting, I suppose, in terms of when you've come into things, like you said, you were ready and raring to go for that 2020 season. Did you find yourself kind of looking back as well, as you're coming into the sport at this point in time, did you want to go and learn about Senna and Prost and that type of thing? Or was it very much a kind of, we hit the ground from here? What was your general approach to learning more about the sport that you're now so passionate about?
I think in the beginning it was like, I guess because it all happened so fast, like when we watched it, because we were going into, he's like, you got to watch it right before the season, like, because the season was just about to start. And so it was like we were mainly focused on what was in front of us. But as we watched it more, and not only like just Drive to Survive, just racing it, like Formula One in general, you find yourself going backwards now because as you listen to it more, when you're listening to the commentators and the broadcasters talking about it, it's like, oh, now I want to know this side of it and know this side, which is one thing that I like about this podcast is that you get a little bit of, you guys go backwards a little, but you're still looking forwards. You get a nice feel for everything.
Yes, like you said, I think as you kind of, because I'm not dissimilar in a lot of ways. Like I haven't been watching Formula One since I was a kid, which I know lots of people, including many of our listeners, have. But it's almost you learn from a historical perspective, the more you're actually able to get out of the current series as well. Is that your experience?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. Yes.
And do you still watch NASCAR, given that that's where it all started?
Yes. Yes, we do. Not, I would say we watch more Formula One, like more, what would be the word? We're, we watch every race when it comes to Formula One. NASCAR, it goes in and out, but there's definitely certain tracks that you want to watch. The road courses are always so much fun. There was one day in the Discord that I was talking about it, and it was probably one of the more wild races. And because it gets interesting too. It's not all, just going around in circles. There's a lot of, as much as people are like, oh, NASCAR's not really racing. I'm like, no, but it is. There's still a lot going on there.
It's definitely still racing. Like you said, there is plenty going on. I think we just need to become more educated in it to be able to talk about it in more depth and really understand it, much like we would say about Formula One to people who don't watch it, and they would just say, oh, isn't it just fast cars going around a circuit lots of times? And as we all know, there's so much more to it. What is it that keeps you hooked now? So now that you're a bit more familiar with, I suppose, the stories and the sport and that type of thing. You said you watch every race, you don't miss a Formula One race. What is it about the sport that you love that really just keeps you watching, keeps you hooked?
I was thinking about this because when I look at NASCAR and I look at Formula One, I feel like Formula One's did a really good job. Obviously, Drive to Survive has really helped that create a storyline too, and you get to know, you've been able to, I guess you would say, I mean, I know we're all not Sky fans, but they allow you to get inside.
Mm.
They allow you to see inside, and I think that that's one thing that stood out as the difference between the two and kind of what's captivated you. But just in general, I think I'm just a sport, like I love sports in general, not just NASCAR or Formula One. I mean, I'm into football, all of it. I'll watch it all. But I like that you get the relationship to it, which I think is probably what's kept the most, I would say.
Well, it's something that's really changed as well, which we talk about a little bit on this podcast, insofar as there didn't used to be the accessibility that there is now when it comes to not just the drivers, but the other people who are involved with Formula One. And Drive to Survive has obviously been a big part of that, but also through all of the other amazing content creators who are out there kind of showing different perspectives, and through all the different kind of, whether it's social media or other kind of content ways of engaging with content through podcasts and the like. It is much more of a there's much more to learn now. There's so much more accessibility, which, like you said, as you get drawn in, you just want to learn more. What are some of the other ways that you?
Yeah, I want to know it all.
I feel the same way. What are some of the other ways that you go and attempt to know it all? There are other different types of media or content that you engage with for Formula One in particular.
I would say ultimately is probably more like the social media aspect. I mean, we all know our algorithms. If you go on my Instagram, it is all Formula One. Like, I laugh because all of my girlfriends, like, it's the beauty stuff, and it's like, oh no, it's all Formula One stuff. It is. And then, like, right now, NASCAR just had their like end of the year party thing, and so it's also all NASCAR on top of it. So I would say mostly that. I've tried other podcasts, and I've, stuck to some of them for a while, but they just don't captivate me the way that you guys do, honestly. I feel like for me, you guys mix facts and put comedy together, comedy is another like favorite thing of mine. And I think that for me, it's what does it.
I promise to anybody who is listening that I didn't ask Tara to say that. That is in her own words.
You did not.
I did not, exactly. But it's always awesome for us to learn about what it is that, obviously makes you want to listen to the podcast, and we can try and do more of that when it comes to the comedy side in particular. But we try not to try too hard. But it's always good to know what it is about what we're producing, because like I said, there are so many different ways that you can engage with the sport, with content and that type of thing, and people come to different platforms for different reasons. So it's always awesome to understand that. Now, talking about NASCAR, talking about the US, that very naturally leads us to our favourite driver, although we probably shouldn't say driver now anymore. We'll go with reserve driver or number 3 driver, depending on which source you're reading, which is Daniel Ricciardo.
Yes.
So you're a Ricciardo fan, and I'm really intrigued as to how that happened. What is it about him that made you say, I'm going to support this guy?
So obviously it goes back to Drive to Survive. It's where you got like your first kind of, where you're learning all the drivers. But for me, I call him Daniel at this point. Like, I just feel like he's such a genuine person. I like genuine people, and he doesn't seem like he's trying too hard. He's just himself. And I personally really enjoy that.
And so different to everybody else on the grid as well, I think just adds a
Yeah.
unique flavor, I suppose, or kind of personality to throw into the mix of lots of personalities, which are, I wouldn't say similar necessarily, but perhaps make his stand out a bit more. I'm trying to be very diplomatic here.
No, I hear you. I also, and like something that I've noticed is that when Daniel's around any other driver, he brings out the best personalities in every driver. And I think that says a lot about him as a person and who he really is. Because I think that ultimately we get the real Daniel probably 95% of the time. I'm sure that there's obviously hard times and times that you're just kind of putting the face on. But he's also very open about that. I've listened to a lot of podcasts he's been on, as well. And, some days are harder than others, but he's real. He keeps it real. And I think that that's very admirable.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. Now, that's going to make next year challenging when we don't have him on the grid, which obviously has been a very difficult news for us all to stomach. I think we're still in denial. Perhaps as we come into next season, we'll be perhaps closer towards that acceptance mode. But let's be clear, I think I'll still be in denial. But is there someone who you're going to get behind in his absence? Are you going to be a Red Bull fan all of a sudden?
Oh, it gets funnier because my other favorite driver would be Checo. So fighting for that second seat is always interesting. But we are like, also, as much as I love Daniel, I love Checo. I think that, and for him, he's a little bit more on like the timid, shy side, not as, so outgoing. But I don't know. He's just somebody that my fiance is also a very like big Checo fan. But then now we've been to Austin twice and we've been to Miami, and also the Mexican fans are the nicest fans in my opinion, you could probably meet. So it just kind of adds to it too. Like, you want to root for him. Like the Mexican Grand Prix, I really wanted him to win, but obviously it didn't work out.
We all did. Oh, we all did, Tara.
I know.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Dear.
So that's, I think, I was going to say, I think this year we're trying to go to Mexico for the GP, ultimately, because if Checo doesn't get a seat, we want to go when he's racing, because I can only imagine that whole area is just absolutely crazy.
I'm sure it will. I'm absolutely sure it will be. And your life is about to get very interesting when it comes to conflicts of interest and who you want to see in that second seat. So, but who knows? Maybe there'll be another opportunity where either, I don't know, Checo could step into a different car, or who knows? As we know, F1 is very good at throwing curveballs at us that we never saw coming. So,
yeah,
there's always hope for something unexpected. Talking about tracks, and so you want to go to Mexico, that's awesome. And while Checo's racing, that's a great thing to tick off your list, I think. But is there another track that you would be desperate to go to if you could? You've already been to Texas, you've already been to Miami. Where else is on the list?
Well, for my fiance and I are getting married, and so ultimately Mexico's kind of thrown a loop into our plans here, because we wanted to originally go to Italy and do Monza for our honeymoon and back in a trip together.
Oh my
So we
goodness,
might
amazing.
put that one on hold and then do that. Yeah. So that would probably be the next one. But then going like to Austria also. Did I say that right? Like
Austria? Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, was that the right one? But also, that's another one I mean, ultimately, we would love to go to all of them if we can.
Wouldn't we all? Do you know what? I
Put it
think
on the
what
bucket
we
list.
oh, yeah, exactly. It's so funny though. I think it's such a juxtaposition, I suppose, between the people who are working for Formula One who are at every race, every second race at the very least, or they might be kind of 70% of them, as we heard when it comes to how some of the teams organise their work and the roles and people who are doing them. And then you've got who would, I'm sure, love to have a break in terms of saying, oh, do I need to be at every single race? Whereas you've got the fans out there going, I'll come to all of them.
Yep, exactly. It's always interesting. There's definitely two sides to everything.
Yes, that's very, very true. So thinking towards next year, you've got some very exciting personal plans when it comes to getting married. And it sounds like you might have to factor in the Formula One calendar with other plans that you have coming up as well. But looking forward, what is it that you would hope to see come out of next season? So thinking along the lines of who would you like to see up there in those kind of really competitive cars when it comes to the drivers' championships, or teams that start to really step forward? What would be some of your hopes and dreams for the 2023 season?
Well, I mean, I would say now, obviously being an American and having an American on the grid, you want to see Williams do well, kind of see them project for a little bit better than they did, this year. I like just a competitive sport. Like, I felt like this year, we all know it kind of started competitive and then it just kind of inched its way a little too far. And it was just kind of like, I just like the competition. I will say NASCAR has done a really good job changing their car. So I think this year was the first year that they've had, it was something like, I want to say it was like 18 different winners, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
That was never really a thing. And so it's fun to get the mix-ups and to see that side of it all. Obviously, I know it's a little different in Formula One, but I would like a little bit more of a competitive season for everyone. I think it just makes it more interesting.
It definitely does. It's very true. And I think, like you said, it's funny how much, when Mercedes, for example, was so dominant for so long and everyone got very tired of that. But when they were suddenly potential underdogs this season, everyone started to hope for their success. It's that feeling of it's not so fun for us as spectators when you're watching a team or a driver just run away with a championship. Or even to have, which of these two drivers are going to win this weekend, throwing that jeopardy in is much more exciting for us.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I know I was looking, I'm sorry.
No, you keep going. You always talk. Don't worry. You go.
I was just going to say that I look back at in 2020 when Checo was racing at where was it? Sakir, something.
Which country?
Something that I can't pronounce that well, so don't take it. It was when he won. It was when he won in 2020. It was towards the end. It was actually the race that George went in for Hamilton because he got COVID.
Yep.
And so in the beginning of the race, I think it was Max and Leclerc that ended up going out. So that kind of put them out. Checo went dead last, coming back up, which ultimately obviously gave him the seat for Red Bull moving forward. But a race like that, throwing it in there and just kind of mixing everything up, I would love it for every race.
Yeah. Well, you think about it when, we had like K-Mag on pole, for example, this year. It was just wild. And you love seeing everybody else's reactions. So the other drivers' reactions to his ability to do that, for his success that weekend, they're so happy for him. And obviously, it creates some amazing content for us when it comes to social media and people's excitement around it. But like you said, it's good for everybody. It's good for the drivers because every win means more. And you can hear it sometimes in like Max's celebrations now, for example. They're nothing like you hear from other drivers when they're either a long shot at a win or it's their first one or whatever it might be. It's kind of like, oh, yeah, good work, guys, another one in the bag.
I absolutely agree with you. It drives me wild. Like because it's exciting to win. Like you always want to be, like if you always want to win, then you should always be excited in my eyes. And so to get that reaction sometimes, and Lewis was doing it too on, in previous years. And it was just like, when you get that other person, like you even said with K-Mag, having him even just on pole, he knew he probably wouldn't be winning the race, but the excitement around it all. And I like to see the underdog way more than to have the just same people winning. And then again, going back to just not getting the excitement of it. It's like, it takes away from it a little bit for me.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. And it's interesting as well when you hear certain interviews, I suppose, with certain drivers as well. And I'm actually thinking of Latifi more than anything, the interview that he did this year with Tom Clarkson. And you could hear how much he appreciated the position that he was in, I suppose. And this is someone who obviously has not had what anyone could objectively classify as a successful Formula One career. However, he's obviously been a successful driver in that he's made it to Formula One, which most won't. But there is no sense of entitlement, I suppose, there. And it's easy for us to forget that he is a paid driver, was a paid driver and that type of thing. But it's that appreciation for the opportunity, I think, and just respect for the position that you're in, that knowing that you're living out the dream of so many. So I think when it starts to sound as though it's like, oh, yep, another rung on the board, or it's a bit kind of business as usual, you feel a sense of wanting them to appreciate it more, I suppose. Does that make sense?
Yes. It does. But then as you were talking to, I was thinking about it a little bit. And I also think too, in certain situations, maybe not so much for like a win, but I feel like social media has hurt a little bit drivers where they're so careful with what they say and what they do and every other action that they're trying to just make sure that they're not making the controversy, which for some people can be rubbed the wrong way as well. Like it's this fine line of trying to find it. And it's like, I go back to like, I think DR has found it. I think that he is, he's just his true self, where I won't name names, but I think that there's a couple people that are just very politically correct sometimes. And it's like, give me a little bit more. Like, you don't have, but I get why they are at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like that catch-22 type thing.
Yeah, totally. And look, you've got to feel for anyone who's in the limelight, I think, in that way. Like and everything can so easily be taken out of context as well. And you have such different ways of producing content now. I think what is good is that we often now get a bit more context than we used to, because we were so reliant on written journalism, written reports, that type of thing, where you lose all of that. Now we tend to get a little bit more because we tend to digest more via videos and that type of thing, whether it's on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, whatever. But even then, little sound bites get taken out and, blasted as kind of clickbait headlines. So like you said, completely understand the line that they're trying to kind of walk, which is not an easy one at all, not trying to cause controversy, but then still giving enough of themselves.
Exactly. It's hard. I feel like they're never going to please anyone the way that, just in general, you can never make everybody happy. So obviously there's always going to be that side of it.
Now, Tara, like many of our listeners, loves sport from all over the world. I know that I, for one, share that passion with her. And for me, well, if I'm going to watch the Melbourne Demons lose in the finals, then I'm going to need the help of VPN for that. And with NordVPN, it is risk-free. So using our link, you have a 30-day money-back guarantee, as well as your 2 years at a discounted rate, and of course the 4 months free too. So just go to nordvpn.com/Lakeside Drive. You can watch all of your favourite drivers and teams lose wherever they are. It's been a tough year. But at least I got to watch it all happen. So go and check out NordVPN and get started today. So thinking about underdogs, and we talked about how we would love to see a generally perhaps more of a mixed results for next year, and we want to see some of those traditional backmarkers perhaps make a bit more progress next year. But thinking about the season that's been as well, was there anyone who surprised you in 2022? And that could be people or teams. Was there anything that stood out to you, something you didn't see coming?
Well, I didn't think McLaren would be as bad as they were. We'll start there. And then you're going to love my next one. Valtteri's, oh my gosh, what do we call this now? What I just forgotten. They're so big here. His, why can't I think of what it's called?
Mullet is the word that we would use in Australia.
His mullet. Thank you. Yeah. It's a mullet here. It's such a big thing here too. And so when I saw it, I was laughing because all of the Aussies were loving it. And I was like, oh, the Americans are going to love this just as much. So his haircut surprised me. Wasn't ready for it, but it's perfect.
Oh goodness, it's so great. What an amazing two surprises. Some good, some not so good though. And depending on who you ask, the haircut's not so good either.
That's very true. Some people are going to say they did. I'm sure there's a lot of people who probably don't like it, but we all love it. So that's what matters.
It's the content we did not know we needed.
Exactly. 100%. I don't know if I'm trying to think if they're, I actually am very surprised that they're putting Ocon and Gasly together. I don't know if that's the best mixture. That was probably a big surprise for me, even though we knew it was coming, like as it got out. But I think it's a very big move. We'll see what happens.
It's bold, and we will see what happens. What do you think here's a question. Who do you think is going to believe that they are the number one driver in that team?
The number one driver? Oh, God, they're both going to think it 100%. And Gasly's probably going to think it more because they brought him in. And I'm sure they sold that to him because he's not going to be a number two driver. He's not leaving to go be a number two because he was already the number one at AlphaTauri. So ultimately, I guess you would say probably more him than anything. But Ocon is just right up there with him. He always thinks he's the number one driver. Did you see his comment that he just recently made a comment about how much work he was doing over Alonso. And we're like, I mean, Alonso is Alonso. He's ultimately done the work.
He's just been doing it over decades and decades. That's all. And I think what's funny with that, like you said, he still thinks he's number one despite being up against a multiple world champion. So that will be interesting. But you heard it here first, Campy. It's going to be the world-class driver of Gasly who's going to be the number one driver at Alpine next year. No, it will be an interesting one to see how that dynamic plays out. He's going to have to get himself out of all the chewing gum stickiness at the bottom of the bin there in order to get that number one driver, I suppose, priority where those situations do arise and there has to be a decision made, perhaps when it comes to strategy, whatever it might be next year. But it will be very, very interesting because I'm kind of thinking out loud here now, but I'm not sure that we will have quite as even a pairing in any other teams in a lot of ways that are maybe Ferrari with Carlos and Leclerc, but obviously they're both kind of on a much higher level, potentially with much better machinery, although we never know what's going to happen next year. Mm-hmm. But, we've got other teams where you have such a distinct kind of preference, I suppose, and that will be very interesting to see. So like you said, Gasly's going to feel like he's number one because he's been brought in, but then you've got Ocon who will say, well, I've been here for longer and I know how this place works and you're on my turf now. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think they will probably say all the right things, at least for the first half of the season, because it'll be in both of their best interests when it comes to having a drive in 2024, to make sure that they are seen as team players and that type of thing. But that is a pairing where I wonder if what we see is what will actually be going on behind the scenes, or if they're just doing a really good job to maintain the teamwork, and be able to exclaim that as loudly as they do over in Red Bull in Alpine as well.
Exactly. I feel like you'll really be able to tell when they start doing content stuff. You can always kind of get the vibe if it's really there or not. Like, for instance, I think when it was DR and Lando in the beginning, you could tell that there was not so much that they didn't like each other, because I don't think that was the case. I think it was ultimately Lando who was having a hard time understanding DR and his kind of the way that he jokes around, but then turn to, the end of the season, and I would even say most of this season, they were like the best of buds.
Yes, and I think it will be interesting, like you said, they actually have to get to know each other in that context, because a lot of these drivers will have either been through karting together and competed with each other when they're kind of 12 or 13. But now, as much as I wouldn't say that they're adults in all circumstances, but you have to let each other grow up as well and learn that person in this new context, because it is very, very different when it comes to that kind of very junior series. There's not as much kind of at stake, and very different team, different expectations, different accountabilities, and some of that obviously comes from a marketing perspective too, in terms of having to work together to produce content for team fans in particular. But it's got something as I think as spectators as well, we have to let evolve too, if that makes sense, in that it's very easy once you've formed an opinion of someone. And I think about, Sebastian Vettel's actually a great example of this, in being the most hated man in Australia for a while there, but now someone who we quite adore, because we've let him grow up, we've let him mature. Now it helps that he's no longer crashing into Australians on quite as regular a basis. But we've let him change over time. You let him grow up, which I think these guys will have to do a bit with each other as well.
For sure. I think you kind of nailed it there. It's also, I'm going back to like what we were saying in social media in general. Everyone is so quick to just be like, oh, look, they don't get along. And then it creates this whole narrative. And it's like, maybe that's not the narrative. And it's letting things play out, letting it all just kind of let them figure out their pieces and then see how it works out. And we'll know if it works or not moving forward into 2024.
Or maybe it's just going to be French on French crime, and it's just going to be absolute battle between the teams, and there's not going to be any kind of respect or cordiality between them, and we can just watch them take each other out every weekend. Who knows? It could make for some. I was just going to say
that will be fun to watch too.
Yeah, exactly right. So just a couple more questions, Tara, while we've got you. I would love to get your view. We talked about it a little bit before in terms of, I suppose, how you've seen the fan base kind of grow around you when it comes to Formula One in the US. But the US has 3 races next year. Obviously, we've got Miami, Texas, and Vegas as well. What are your general thoughts, I suppose, in the direction that Formula One is taking, thinking about how they're trying to obviously capture that US market, which has not been traditionally where their biggest supporters are, but also the way in which they're going about it, these kind of spectacle races with the 2 new additions, in comparison to others, which even in Texas you would say feels a little bit more, I don't want to say grassroots, but there for the real fans, if that makes sense, if I dare to say it. What is your view on that market and the way they're going about things?
So we went to Austin last year for 2021, and then and that was with John and his girlfriend as well. So we went, there's a couple of us that went. We had the best time. I thought it was, not super packed. Fast forward to 2022 this year when just Josh and I went, it was like a whole nother world. The amount of people that were there. Sunday was crazy. Like I kind of looked at Josh at one point and I was like, this isn't as enjoyable as I remember it like last year. And I'm going to assume that they just sold more tickets. I didn't look into it to see like what the difference was on Sundays, but it was just like a mosh pit everywhere you went. And then so the difference between Austin is hilly, so you get levels. So there's places that you can go and sit and have, for general like admission kind of style. Well, Miami's not like that. Miami was very flat. You were here. It's very flat here.
Yeah.
There's no hills, nothing. And they used the stadium, which I thought would have been a really good option for them to then be able to get a lot of cool like vantage points. But they put up so many tents that covered it all. So you couldn't even see it if you were in general admission. We had seats in Miami. We actually had like decent, like good, we ended up picking like a good area to be in, which is like that Red Bull section that was towards the back. But anyone else, I can't, it was so tight. To me, it wasn't as enjoyable. So I'll be very curious to see how Vegas is, because once again, you're going from Miami to Vegas, glitz and glam. It's so here, everything is about status. And I don't love that part of it. I feel like they could have there's plenty of places in the United States that have already tracks that they can kind of configure and make it almost like an Austin, but they haven't done that, which is a little upsetting.
Well, I think it's pretty telling in terms of what they're trying to achieve when it comes to, like you said, making it spectacle based. And even for the Vegas launch, I think it was George Russell, we were talking about this perhaps on a recent podcast. George Russell kind of said, I'm not sure how fun this is going to be to race, but it will be good to watch. Which to me was interesting. Like they're already calling it now, looking at the layout of the track and everything around it as well. But look, do you know what? Us mere mortals will never find out anyway, because there's no chance of us being able to get tickets probably to somewhere like Vegas. I think Campy actually looked into getting just a hotel room that would have a view of the track, and it's just impossible. It's just not a thing that you can. It's designed for a different audience. Let's put it that way.
100%. We had like early access tickets. And by the time and we had like the early access tickets, because there was like 2 different launches. By the time that we could even get in, my tickets were showing as 2,500. And I was like, that's ridiculous. And then my next comment was, because I used to work in the hotel industry, I'm very aware with what happens with hotel blocks. I was like, there's going to be no way. The amount of money that you're going to spend that weekend, no. It's not.
No.
And that's the problem. It takes away, it takes away from the sport. It's sad.
Yeah. No, I understand. I think we should all just be more like VB, grow some mullets, get a VB and sit in our deck chairs and watch from there.
One of our dreams too in Austin. One of our dreams in Austin is because they have the like the RV area. Go for the weekend, get an RV. That's NASCAR style. That's how it normally is in NASCAR. Go hang out in the like little tailgate area for the whole weekend. VB style.
VB style. I love it. And
VB style. I have one thing to say. So everyone talks about Danica and how they love her. So growing up, being that we've gone to the races, and it was in 2016, it was whoever knows like any NASCAR races, it was Tony Stewart's last race. We had pit passes and everything. So you can go on the like pit lane as they're all getting ready. My sister and I, they're all starting to get into the cars. And I was like, all right, I'm going to use the bathroom. We're going to go to our seats and everything. All of a sudden, Danica walks in the bathroom, comes in, the nicest lady ever.
Amazing.
And was just like one of the girls in the bathroom. She's in there washing her hands, and all the ladies are like, good luck. She's like, thank you. So it's like, I wanted to tell you guys, because she is just really like the nicest, most genuine person.
Amazing. That is fantastic. What an experience. And also I bet you that she was just smiling even pre-race about to go out there. So take that, Campy.
Didn't look nervous. Yeah. Didn't look nervous. Nothing. She's in there having conversation. I think she told a lady at one point, she's like, oh my gosh, I love your top. She was just so nice. It was like, but so since you guys have been talking about her recently, I was like, oh, I have to tell you. Yes,
absolutely. That's fantastic. I love that story. I'm so glad we caught it as well. That's amazing. And do you like, it's really interesting with NASCAR as well, because it's so different, like you said, with so many different winners and how they've changed things to make that happen. Like, do you follow specific drivers, or what is it? Like, I suppose, how do you approach it as a sport, as a fan, or is it just, I just want to go and watch people race?
No, it definitely certain drivers. It's funny because I've kind of like taken like the people that my dad loves and then the people that my dad hate. And Josh, my fiance, is some of the people that my dad doesn't like, he likes. And so it's been like a fun, like kind of rivalry in the household of like, you know, who we follow. But, and I was going to kind of say this, but we got like off the other way, but it's interesting to see NASCAR has kind of changed and is trying to be more like Formula One in like the drama and like getting like being able to like get the stories out, because I think they figured out that they want to try to put the correlation, and they're doing a much better job at it, trying to get there with it all. But no, there's definitely drivers like growing up, my dad was a huge Earnhardt fan, which then made him be Earnhardt Jr., but he's no longer there. But Daniel Suarez is another Mexican driver who Josh and I like love to watch and root for. And they started in a new team, him and this other guy, Ross Chastain, and they've done really well. Came in, Pitbull backs the team, which is funny. Another like random
Mr. Worldwide, getting into NASCAR, supporting
Mr.
that. That's incredible.
Yep, he's done. I think it was last year that he came out and he performed, and then I think he did like the driver start your engine at the first race.
How good. Oh, that I'm gonna have to go and look that up.
Yeah,
that would be amazing content. I love a bit of Pitbull, I'm not gonna lie.
Oh no, I do too. I like coming from Miami, like old school Pitbull is like the Pitbull that I love, but his stuff now like is like kind of more dancey, is also just as good.
Oh, it's good fun, but I'm with you. I like, gosh, I reckon if you look back in some of my older playlists, it's a real feature. I don't know who I thought I was at that point in time. Neither did anybody else. So like, why are you this like 17-year-old in Tasmania listening to Pitbull? But I don't know, whatever. I loved it.
No, I hear you. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, I listened to this, like not only Pitbull, just other things sometimes too. I'm like, probably shouldn't have been listening.
Oh, goodness. And singing along as well as some underage, which would have been wildly inappropriate. And the best part as well is that even now I will sing all of their stuff like in the car or whatever else, even when they switch into like Spanish or whatever. And my fiance Dan will look at me and go, you realize that you don't speak Spanish, right? You just...
Josh does the same thing to me. I'll go like full rap and he's like, who are you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. That's so fantastic. Well, who are we? Who knows? Great. Like just eclectic.
We're just
whatever.
That's who we are.
Exactly. We're a good time. That's a fantastic answer.
We're VB.
We are a good time. We're a VB. We're just VB in our hearts. We're not gutsy enough to cut our hairs
yeah.
into mullets, but we will just support him in every other way.
Exactly.
Maybe you should do that, Tara. I think you should rock a mullet for your wedding.
Oh, that sounds like a fantastic idea.
Can you imagine what Josh would say?
I would die. Oh my gosh. No. He would be like, I don't know if I can do this.
I'm questioning everything I know about you. You're not the person who I met.
Exactly. He's like, are you going through your midlife crisis now?
Yeah. Like, it's too early for that. It's too early for that. What a caption for this episode. I think we might have just found our phrase just there, which is awesome. And what a note to end on. Thank you so much for joining me, Tara. That was really good fun. It was awesome to hear about your perspective on Formula One from, I suppose, an American fan base, but also how you've got into the sport as well. So thanks so much for spending some time with me and having everyone get to know you a bit.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time.